Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is Pro Revenge Story. It was a fun morning at the beginning of last month, starting up my truck and waking everyone up at 3:15 a.m. to learn someone swiped the hollowed out cats. The idiots missed the neighbors' cameras that basically gave away who they were. It's two guys from the area who drive around in a pretty busted up police Crown Vic. I chose not to call the cops. Instead, I called one of my friends who's code enforcement and let him know what my plan was. Hey Mark, those catalytic converters I told you about last year, someone finally stole them, I said when he picked up. Mark chuckled. The non-functional ones? That's karma for you. What are you thinking? I'm going to handle it my way. That Crown Vic they drive has been a nuisance for months. I'll let the department know you're finally doing that nuisance tow you've been talking about, he replied. The car they drive isn't street legal as it has no license plates or insurance or working taillights and rattles like hell due to the trash sound system they installed. They also spend their whole day at a chicken shack smoking. Not sure who they're getting money from, but I'm guessing stealing catalytics was part of the equation. When I spotted the car sitting on a quiet street last Thursday, I called it in and got the go-ahead to tow. I took it straight to the police station, and they tried to run an owner check with the VIN number only to find out it hadn't been registered since 2017, and the owner was someone other than the guys who sold them the car with no title because of all the back registration owed. Officer Jenkins shook his head as he looked at the paperwork. This vehicle's been off the books for years. No way these kids have legitimate ownership. So what happens now? I asked. We can go ahead and take it to the junkyard until we can get a black title, basically a certificate of destruction, he explained. By then, the two idiots were running around all over town looking for their car, thinking it got stolen by one of their friends as a prank. The key lock was so worn out you could start it with any car key. They found it at the junkyard and tried to steal it back by one of them distracting the owner while the other snuck in to take their car, but the junkyard was aware of who they were, so they cut the drive shaft off beforehand. You looking for something? The junkyard owner Dave asked when they showed up. Just browsing, man. Got any good parts? The taller one said, trying to act casual. Meanwhile, his buddy was sneaking around back, not realizing the car was already disabled. I missed out on this part, but they got arrested for trying to steal their car back, and they watched as the junkyard used a crane to rip the car to shreds. When I saw it, the remains looked like a toddler just ripped it to the bare frame out of curiosity. You should have seen their faces, Dave told me later, like watching someone destroy their prized possession, though that car was anything but prize-worthy. They've been out of jail since Saturday, but haven't left their trailer. I did a drive-by earlier today and noticed a beater Jeep Liberty in their driveway, also with no plates. I'm already working with the cops on taking that too if I see it out in public, except I won't miss the show next time. Round 2 might be coming soon, I texted Mark this morning. Let me know when. I wouldn't mind witnessing karma in action this time, he replied. The next one is an entitled people story. I've lived in my neighborhood for about 6 years now, and for the most part it's been fine. The houses are nice, the neighbors are decent, and the location is convenient for work. The only real problem has always been the HOA. Like most HOAs, ours started out reasonable enough, but over the past couple of years it got taken over by a small group of busybodies who have nothing better to do than police everyone's lives. The HOA president is this retired guy who treats the neighborhood like his personal kingdom. His 2 board members are just as bad, always looking for violations and sending out nasty grams about the most ridiculous things. Paint colors that are off-white instead of pure white, garden gnomes being inappropriate lawn decorations, Christmas lights staying up 2 days past their arbitrary deadline. You get the idea. Now, what the HOA president and his little crew didn't know about me is that I work as a county building and code inspector. It's not something I advertise to my neighbors because honestly I like to keep my work and home life separate. I've been doing this job for over a decade, and I know every single building code, zoning regulation, and county ordinance like the back of my hand. A few months back we got hit with a massive storm. I'm talking about the kind of storm that knocks down trees, floods streets, and leaves half the county without power for days. Our neighborhood got hit pretty hard. Trees were down everywhere, blocking roads and damaging properties. The power was out, and debris was scattered across every yard. The morning after the storm, I got up early to assess the damage. My property had a huge oak tree branch that had come down and destroyed part of my fence. But more importantly, the street in front of my house was completely blocked by a massive fallen tree. Nobody was getting in or out of our cul-de-sac without some serious work. Since I had my county-issued pickup truck with all my equipment, and because I actually give a damn about my neighbors, I decided to help clear the road. I fired up my chainsaw and spent the better part of the morning cutting up that tree and hauling branches to the side of the road. Several neighbors came out to help, and we worked together to make the street passable again. My truck was parked on the street during all of this, loaded with branches and debris. It had my county identification clearly visible on the door, my emergency lights, the whole official setup. I was planning to haul everything to the county disposal site once we finished clearing the immediate area. Around noon, I took a break to grab some water and check on my wife. I was inside for maybe 20 minutes. When I came back out, my truck was gone. I stood there confused for a moment, thinking maybe I'd parked it somewhere else in my storm brain fog. But no, it had definitely been right there on the street. I walked around looking for it, and that's when I noticed the HOA president standing in his driveway 3 houses down, watching me with this smug expression. I walked over and asked if he'd seen what happened to my truck. He smiled this condescending smile and told me it had been towed for violation of the parking regulations. Apparently, the HOA rules state that no commercial vehicles or trucks can be parked on the street overnight or for extended periods. I pointed out that it was the middle of the day. I was actively using the truck for storm cleanup, and there was a literal state of emergency declared by the county. His response was that the rules don't have exceptions, and my truck was parked on the street for over an hour, which he considered extended. I asked him if he seriously just had my truck towed while I was helping clear debris from a storm. He said the HOA had a responsibility to maintain standards even during emergencies, and that my work truck was an eyesore that violated community guidelines. He also mentioned that he'd been meaning to address my truck for a while now, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity to enforce the rules. Here's where it gets good. I very calmly asked him if he was sure he wanted to stand by that decision. He got this annoyed look and said something about how I couldn't intimidate him with vague threats, and that the HOA's authority was absolute within the neighborhood boundaries. He said if I had a problem with it, I could take it up at the next HOA meeting in 2 weeks. I didn't argue. I just smiled, nodded, and went back to my house. My wife asked what I was going to do, and I told her I was going to do my job. The next morning, I showed up to work and had a conversation with my supervisor. I explained the situation and mentioned that in all my years of driving through this neighborhood for work and living there myself, I'd never actually done an official inspection of the area. My supervisor agreed that it was probably overdue, especially given the storm damage and the need to ensure everything was up to code for insurance and safety purposes. I spent the next week doing the most thorough inspection of my neighborhood that has probably ever been done. And I mean thorough. I checked everything against county code, zoning regulations, building permits, and environmental compliance standards. The HOA president's house was my first stop. That beautiful deck he'd built 3 years ago, no permit on file. The shed in his backyard, also unpermitted, and too close to the property line. The fence extension he'd added violated the height restriction for front yard fencing. His driveway expansion, unpermitted and exceeded the allowed impervious surface coverage for his lot size. But wait, there's more. Remember those 2 board members who love enforcing HOA rules? One of them had converted their garage into a living space without permits. The other had installed a whole irrigation system that violated water usage regulations and didn't have the required backflow prevention device. I documented everything with photos, measurements, and detailed reports. Every single violation got an official citation and a deadline for correction or permit application. But here's the beautiful part. The HOA itself had violations. That fancy new entrance gate they'd installed, no permit, and it violated setback requirements from the county road. The community pool they were so proud of, multiple health code violations and safety issues, the storage facility they'd built for HOA maintenance equipment, unpermitted structure on common land that didn't comply with commercial building standards. I issued citations to the HOA as an organization, which meant the board members were personally liable for the fines if they weren't corrected. The total cost of permits, corrections, and fines for just the HOA property violations was going to run into the tens of thousands of dollars. When the citations started arriving in mailboxes, my phone started ringing. The HOA president showed up at my door demanding to know what was going on. I explained very professionally that following the storm, the county had conducted routine inspections to ensure all structures were safe and compliant. I mentioned that unfortunately numerous violations had been discovered throughout the neighborhood. He started yelling about harassment and retaliation. I calmly reminded him that these were all legitimate code violations that existed regardless of any personal issues. I also pointed out that as a county inspector, I had not only the right, but the obligation to enforce county codes. I suggested he might want to contact a lawyer, but they'd quickly tell him that everything I documented was accurate and enforceable. The look on his face when he realized he couldn't do anything about it was priceless. He'd spent years wielding HOA rules like a weapon, and now he was on the receiving end of actual laws with actual consequences. The next HOA meeting was something I wish I'd recorded. The board had to explain to everyone why the HOA was facing massive fines and why several board members were personally dealing with expensive permit issues. Multiple people asked if this had anything to do with my truck being towed, and the president tried to deny any connection. But here's the thing about small neighborhoods: everyone talks. People knew my truck had been towed during storm cleanup. They knew I worked for the county. And they weren't stupid enough to believe the timing was coincidental. The HOA president and both board members resigned within a month. They had no choice, really. The community was furious about the fines and the increased HOA fees that would be needed to cover the violations. New board members were elected, and the first thing they did was rewrite a bunch of the ridiculous rules. As for my truck towing fee, the new board voted to reimburse me from HOA funds, citing that the towing was an inappropriate action during a declared emergency. They also formally apologized and updated the parking rules to include reasonable exceptions. I got my truck back the same day it was towed by calling the towing company and showing them my county ID and the emergency declaration. They didn't charge me once they understood the situation, but I let the HOA think I'd paid the fee just so they'd have to deal with reimbursing me. The best part? I didn't break a single rule. I didn't make anything up or abuse my authority. I simply did my job exactly as I'm supposed to do it, inspecting properties for code compliance in my assigned area. Every citation I issued was legitimate and would have held up in court. Sometimes malicious compliance isn't about following someone else's rules to the letter. Sometimes it's about making sure everyone follows the actual rules, including the people who love to enforce their own petty ones. The neighborhood is much quieter now. People actually like the new HOA board, and nobody has said a word about my truck being parked on the street while I work on my property. Funny how things work out when you mess with someone who actually knows what they're doing. The next one is a petty revenge story. Early in my career, I worked as an engineer for a defense contractor for about 4 years, getting my typical 2 to 4% raises and standard promotions that take years and years to qualify for. I realized that in my current role, I was pretty much maxed out for the foreseeable future and would be scraping by for years more. So I tried to get on the management track and got given a project engineer position to prove myself. I managed a team of 4 engineers, a designer, and 2 admins, and we designed and manufactured a system that made $1.6 million in sales in our first year of work. We got the company a patent and were nominated by the USAF and became finalists as DoD Contractor Technical Team of the Year, I don't recall the exact wording, and were flown to DC for a big awards ceremony. I spent 100 days away from my family that year, traveling to test locations, customers, vendors, etc. It was brutal, but we were wildly successful. When annual performance reviews came in, mine was 10/10. I was thrilled. Then I found out one of my team members, who had a different manager, was promoted early to a senior position and that I did not, and I just got the standard 3% raise again. I was livid. I had a meeting with my boss and his response was that he didn't think my team member deserved a promotion or a big raise, but he wasn't their boss, so basically I should try real hard again and we'll see next year. Duck that. I basically quit and just barely worked my 40 HRs and went home. I never traveled unless I really wanted to. I never stayed late. I took almost every Friday off to burn through my leave. I took all my sick days, etc. My mental health was much better. The only thing I really did extra was take advantage of the education budget our group had, but rarely got used. My previously promoted coworker, who I really liked personally, started taking MBA evening classes that the company reimbursed him for, but they came with obligations to stay there for X amount of years. They also had a nice budget for software training without such stipulations, so we both signed up for FEA and 3D modeling classes. We traveled around together taking these classes and building our resumes. About a month after the classes were finished, I secretly started applying for jobs that required those specific skills and quickly got hired for a position with a base annual income that was 200% my existing rate, plus it paid overtime. I put in my notice and my boss was really upset. We just paid for you to travel all over to learn these new skills that we need. Don't you have any loyalty or guilt? How much are they paying you? Let's see if we can match it. That's more than I make. It was, and with OT I made about 3x the following year for a competitor. Life-changing good times. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This story of malicious compliance was shared with me by my grandfather many years ago, so some details may be lost, and I am not sure about all of the job titles. However, I will do my best to convey the main idea as I recall it. My grandpa used to work for the railroad as a signalman. His role was to ride on the back of the train and use a lantern to communicate through signals to the train driver at the front. At that time, trains were much shorter than they are today. In modern times, safety regulations are written in blood and have good reasons behind them. My grandpa said that back in those days, safety protocols were still being developed, and those working on the trains had a better understanding of what was truly safe and effective, as opposed to what the rulebook suggested. A bit more information. The mechanism that connects trains is called a coupling, and the two parts come together lock and they're solidly connected. Now, to compare the situation to Legos, you don't just delicately set one Lego on top of another and expect them to connect. You have to put these bits of plastic together firmly enough to get that snap noise. Train couplings are similar, only we're talking about metal carriages that are weighed in tons, not tiny plastic bits measured in grams. So instead of a snap, you need a good proper bang onward to the actual story. The train depot had recently hired a new manager. I'm not sure if they have an official title, so I'll just refer to him as a manager, who decided to be very by the book. He very quickly became hated by everyone because the rule book of the time was written by someone more concerned with creating arbitrary rules rather than ensuring that things would actually work. Grandpa grabbed his lanterns and jumped into the caboose at the end of a line of trains. The engine backed up along the track to prepare for coupling, and the manager came running out yelling and waving his arms. The engine driver and the manager argued back and forth, and even Grandpa could see the engine driver's exasperated sigh from the back of a train. Malicious compliance was initiated. The engine slowly backed along the track until the couplings came together in a gentle kiss, or as gentle as two multi-ton titans can kiss. The chain of trains didn't even shudder. The engine driver then moved forward, leaving the line of trains behind. The couplings touched, but there was no bang to signal their connection. Grandpa signaled that it didn't work. The train stopped, then slowly and gently reversed again. Another kiss, but no coupling. Pulled forward, backed up, tried again. Kiss, no coupling. This repeated for 15 minutes before the engine driver and the manager got into another argument. Grandpa said he could guess the argument. Engine driver: "This isn't working and we're wasting time. We need to get back on schedule." Manager: "Nope. Keep following the book exactly. No deviation. The book says this will work, so follow the book until it does." 15 more minutes passed of kiss. No coupling. Pull forward, back up, try again. They had been at it for 30 minutes by now, and the train was officially behind schedule. However, the manager was still insisting that they must keep doing it by the book. Finally, someone higher up, the depot station master, came along, trying to find out why the engine was acting like the slowest pendulum in existence and why they had wasted half an hour. After getting the story from both the engine driver and manager, depot master finally told the manager to shut his howling screamer and let the people who actually work on trains get the job done. This stupid process had gone on long enough, and it was painfully obvious that the book was wrong. The manager crossed his arms and was steaming. The engine pulled forward a bit more than by the book. The whistle blew its warning call and then came in reverse at a good clip. Obviously not at full ramming speed, but fast enough to get the job done. Bang! The line of trains shuddered gently, then the engine pulled forward. The trains were finally coupled. Grandpa signaled all good, and the train got underway. Grandpa didn't get to hear the reaming, but the manager looked like a little boy getting the scolding of his life as the caboose passed him on its way out of the depot. The next one is an entitled people story. I work with college students. Most of my day-to-day work is on campus, but occasionally I get travel opportunities to chaperone clubs and student orgs to conferences. One of these student orgs was doing a conference 2 states away from our campus, around an 8-hour drive. I was originally supposed to chaperone the trip with a colleague, but the conference didn't announce the dates until a month before, and my colleague had a wedding that weekend, so it was me plus 5 students. President, vice president, PR manager, programming manager, and sustainability manager. Most of the students were seniors with a lot of experience in this org, so I figured they understood the prep work for this conference. Because there were so many of us, my boss rented us 2 cars for travel, one for me and one for the vice president. I got a Nissan Altima, and VP got a Toyota Camry. Well, the prep work for this conference, and the actual conference itself, showed me these students had zero care for the club, the conference, or anything else. Just to name a few problems, I asked them to set up a pre-travel meeting before we left campus to go over expectations. They agreed multiple times, but never actually scheduled the meeting. They added an hour onto our travel time because they kept asking to stop so they could get snacks. They didn't complete any pre-conference activities. Normally, there are several small competitions to make banners and present educational sessions at the conference. Even when I reminded them multiple times, I asked them to pack some old club merch to bring to a swap shop at the conference so we could order new club merch after we returned to campus. They never packed it. They showed up late to opening ceremonies, disappeared halfway through the educational sessions of the conference to go buy souvenirs, and were late to the closing ceremonies. They claimed they didn't know that they were supposed to be somewhere, even though I had sent them a digital schedule. They complained when other schools were winning awards during the closing ceremonies because they felt they deserved to win those awards, despite doing zero prep work and missing half of the conference. This was my first time chaperoning students alone, and I was struggling trying to keep a handle on them, especially with most of them being juniors/seniors who acted like they knew better than me. During all of this, I made one request. We were driving back to campus on Sunday. I had weekly plans for 6:30 p.m. on Sundays that I wanted to keep in place. Because we crossed a time zone to get to this conference, and because they added an hour onto the original travel time with all their stops, I asked if we could be ready to leave at 7 a.m. on Sunday morning. Vice President immediately started whining. "That's so early. Oh my God, can't we do 7:30? I said that this was quite literally my one ask. They had already made me look like a fool by blowing off half of the conference. Please just be in the lobby at 7 o'clock so I can take you home. They relented. I sent a text message into the group chat reminding them of our 7 a.m. departure time and then went to bed at my old man time of 9:30. What I didn't know was immediately after I left, the vice president turned around and immediately said, "No one listen to Spaghetti Shoestrings, we're leaving whenever I want because I have the keys to the Camry," and basically convinced the group to go along with a 7:30 departure time. So I get up the next morning and sit in the lobby at 6:50. 7 o'clock hits and no one is here. At 7:02, I message into our group chat to see if they're awake. Programming manager immediately responds, "Be down in a minute." Still, no one shows up. By 7:10, I'm annoyed, and by 7:15, I'm fuming. I send a message basically saying, "I've been so patient with y'all all weekend, and I asked for one thing, and you couldn't even do that. I'm leaving at 7:30. Not meeting you in the lobby at 7:30. Leaving. Driving off the lot. So anyone who doesn't want to cram themselves into the damn Camry needs to be in the lobby in the next 5 minutes." Wouldn't you know it, suddenly president, programming manager, and PR manager are on their way. Even vice president gets down. Where is our sustainability manager? Oh, he jumped in the shower at 7:11 a.m. By this point, I'm starting to get filled in by the president on what happened the night before. She told me about how the vice president said that she would text me to let me know of the new plans. No one had ever texted me. I looked at the vice president and told her that since she has the keys to the Camry and she wanted to stay longer so bad, she can drive everyone except the president and all their stuff. They'll have to wait for sustainability manager to get out of the shower, and I'm leaving now. They can catch up and we'll meet for lunch at some point. Then I left. Fun fact, the Camry was smaller than the Altima, and the students were uncomfortable enough with 3 of them in the car together for the drive to the conference. But now they'll have to fit an additional person because they just kept trying to push my limits. Was it the most responsible thing of me to leave 5 students alone in a separate state while I was technically supposed to be chaperoning them? Perhaps, but I didn't call anyone to check. So I drove off the lot at 7:29 a.m. and I made it to my 6:30 plans that night. And I recruited an entirely new executive board for the next year that are much more excited about actually doing their jobs. The next one is an entitled parent story. My best friend owns a lakefront property that's only a couple-hour drive away from my home. It's the kind of place that only recently got decent cell service, and it was exciting when the only local grocery store, which closes at 6 p.m. and doesn't open on Sunday, started accepting credit cards instead of being cash only. Suffice to say, it's not precisely easy to just run to the 24-hour corner store for necessities. Last year, there was a little bit of a problem involving someone who had had a few too many drinks late at night and a splitting axe. So this year, my friend invested in a buttload, I believe it's called a cord, of pre-chopped firewood that spent the summer sitting a safe distance from the fire pit. Over the course of the summer, we burned through about 90% of it. The remaining 10% posed a problem, termites had found it, and the lake house is made of wood. 10% of a buttload is a lot of wood, and my friend rather enjoyed having a house. Solution? Bonfire. We made the most of it and threw a party. Friends brought up sides. There were several grills and a smoker being put to use. In the organizing for this, I was tasked with bringing up the ingredients for s'mores. A lot of s'mores. When I was tasked with this purchase, I made a point to ask around and confirm nobody had weakness to gluten. Nobody said they did, so I got the cheap kind of crackers. The party started in the afternoon and everyone was having a fantastic time. Several people who were out on the lake and got lured in by the smell of all the meat cooking asked if they could have some, and the answer was, of course they could. My friends are those kinds of people. There certainly was enough food for everybody. When the sun started going down, preparations were made to light the fire, and the fun police, red wives, girlfriends, ruined everything by making sure no lighter fluid or gasoline was used. Just a regular boring grill lighter and some paper and the powdered wood left by the termites. Can't have everything. Once the fire took off proper and it got a little darker, I started issuing wooden skewers and marshmallows to the kids so they could make s'mores. Adults were self-serve. I didn't feel like I needed to inform them that they shouldn't poke anyone or anything with the skewers. One unfamiliar little girl and her mom popped up in the queue, and I gave her the same instructions I gave to anyone. And the kid's mother asked, "Do you have gluten-free graham crackers?" And I shook my head no and apologized, saying that kind are kinda expensive, and when I asked, nobody said they had a weakness to gluten. I figured it wasn't a huge deal. Just add another piece of chocolate, and it's a s'more if you squint hard enough. Shortly after that encounter with the woman, which I'd foolishly figured was settled, I heard a child scream and start splashing down at the water, so I dropped everything and ran over like most at the party had done. Dark plus water equals scary. All hands on deck kind of situation. Happily enough, the child in question was fine. He'd tripped and face-planted off of a dock and into water, which was about a foot deep. Just scared the daylights out of himself. Nothing a towel and a change of clothes couldn't fix. When everyone returned to the fire, something was missing. All of the stuff to make s'mores had disappeared. Marshmallows and skewers were still there, but no crackers or chocolate. Started to head scratch and asked kind of loudly if anyone knew what had happened to the crackers and chocolate. Gluten Mom piped up, "My daughter couldn't have a s'more. That wasn't fair to her." I just stare at the woman. "So what did you do with the crackers and chocolate?" "I threw it in the fire. I hate it when people deliberately exclude my daughter. Now you've learned your lesson." I was still shocked at this point. "You threw the food in the fire?" "Yep, Walmart has gluten-free. You can just go get them. They're not that expensive." The nearest Walmart to the camp is a 45-minute drive one way, and most of the adults had at least a couple beers in them at that point. At this point, the kids who didn't get distracted when someone fell in the water are showing back up with variable amounts of char on their marshmallows, excited for their last s'mores of the summer, and they're just as confused as I was about where the stuff went. Parents are grabbing new skewers and marshmallows, realizing something's missing. "Where'd the stuff go?" I just point at Gluten Mom. "This woman threw it all in the fire, since I didn't bring gluten-free crackers." "She did what? Who even is that?" She was one of the people who had shown up on a boat drawn in by the smell. Nobody knew who she was. Kids have started crying, parents just look at her with disgust, and this woman has the audacity to say, "What's the big deal? Walmarts are everywhere." "You'd better go. Now." She doubles down, starts getting louder. "You made me do that. I didn't do anything wrong. You did when you excluded my daughter." The person who had inflicted this woman on us shows up, asked what had happened, and upon being told what she'd done didn't even seem shocked, just tired. "I'm sorry, this is her first time up here. She didn't know." Gluten Mom squawks, "No, we're going." Everyone had toasted marshmallows, but it was kind of a gut punch that she'd managed to ruin summer's last hurrah for us. Anyway, thank you for watching.